Okay, guys, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order since we have a quorum, and start with the Pledge of Allegiance with Kim will lead us in. No, Janet will lead us in. All right. All right. So, Peter, if you could update us on where the rest of our members are, that would be fabulous.
Okay, we're going to have a change of the guard here in a few minutes. But so Janet Abelson, who's our chair, could not make it today. Michael, who's the vice chair, is on his way. He's in a van with the rest of the East County representatives, and they're stuck in Highway 4 traffic. So they're just running late. So I've asked Debbie to go ahead and start the meeting since we have a quorum, so we can try and keep things on time if possible. And then when Michael gets here with the East County folks, he can take over the meeting.
Okay. So the other option, I guess, would be to call, but not on a paratransit bus. That's just not probably going to be conducive to calling somebody and having them participate by phone, but that might be a little noisy. Okie dokie. So, summary of, let's see, public introductions. Let's start with Kim, since she said no to me already on something else.
Kim Ridgway, AC Transit.
Janet Bilbis, City of El Cerrito.
Vicki Wojciechowski, City of San Pablo.
Misha Carr, City of Richmond.
Rita Xavier, Advisory Council on Aging.
Debbie Toth from Rehab Services of Northern California, Central County.
Josh Sullivan from the Contra Costa Developmental Disabilities Council.
Michael Hoppy, Independent Living Resources of Contra Costa and Solano County.
Yeah, but that's okay. We'll
voice over.
Okay. Peter Engel, CCTA staff.
Irene Ortega, CCTA staff.
I did.
John Cunningham, Contra Costa County staff.
Hi, Andrea Foti, Monument Impact.
And if we could, just real quick, if we could have all of our guests make sure and sign in the sign-in sheet in the back.
I see you guys getting up and running to the sign-in sheet right now. That's awesome. Okay. So do we have any public comment on issues not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we have a summary of actions from the July 18th, 2016 PCC meeting. So, Peter, did you want me to go over this? Did you want approval of this? It says attachment action.
Yeah, so they need to approve it.
So,
basically, it serves as a summary, which has previously been in minutes, which is more detailed. So it's a summary of actions. So it's something that has to be approved.
okay. So if everybody could just take a minute and review it and make sure that you don't need to see any changes made to the summary of actions.
I forgot, you're usually not here this point of the meeting when we do this.
But notice Debbie Toth was present at the meeting. Okay. Okay, would anybody like to entertain or propose a motion to approve the summary of actions?
I approve. Motion to approve the
I need a second.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I wasn't here.
Okay, Janet and Rita abstain. Okay, thank you. I asked if there were, okay, vote, right, because I did okay, abstentions and anybody opposed would mean that everybody else is okay with it, right? Thank you, Michael, for your support. Okay. All right, so now we need to move to the approval of 2017 Paratransit Coordinating Council meeting calendar, which should be attached to the packet that Josh so nicely printed for me. He didn't know he was printing it for me.
I just, in an effort to, kill a little bit more time waiting for East County to get here. So
And they are here. Look at that. East County in the house.
I'll just say that normally we bring this agenda to you in November. Mm-hmm. I didn't think I was going to be here in November because I thought I was going to be in Kansas City, but I'm actually in Kansas City the week before, so I will be here in November, but that's why this is coming now instead of November, because I wasn't sure, just in case the meeting got canceled for November.
Okay.
Okay. Did I kill enough time? Wait for...
I think that was great. So I think that Michael officially gets handed the microphone once he sits down, so he's walking around the room. See how that goes? All right. No worries. Okay, so we come back to that, or is that just our regular schedule? Is there anything that's out of the ordinary on this?
The only thing that's out of the ordinary is the thing that happens every year in January. The third Monday is always Martin Luther King Day, so we have the PCC meeting on the fourth Monday, which this reflects. Yeah, it is. So, I mean, that's something, I was thinking, if that's a concern for people, we might address that, even for this next November's meeting. It's the Monday of the holiday, Thanksgiving holiday week. So, if people want to look at rescheduling that or doing something or canceling it or whatever, I thought we'd take that up with when we get to the agenda item. That's the next scheduled meeting. But
Oh, you mean at the agenda, at the end of the agenda, where we talk about that, or okay? Well, let's talk about that at that point then. So then we would come back and change the calendar if need be.
yeah, we could just if it appeared there. No, it wouldn't affect this calendar. Oh, you mean if we decide for future years to not have it? Yeah, then we could just adjust the schedule next year at one of the meetings.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. All right. So for orientation purposes, everybody, we are on now approval of the 2017 Paratransit Coordinating Council meeting calendar. And the update from Peter is that all of the dates are within what our regular annual calendar typically looks like, including January, which is scheduled to be the fourth Monday of January instead of the third because it falls on a holiday. I would entertain a motion to move that we accept this calendar.
I so move.
Rita first. I need a second.
I second.
Michael seconds. All of those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And can we transition it to Michael now?
Yeah, I might add, Michael, before you start, that prior to that last vote, our friends from East County's bus finally got through, and so Michael and Tom and Sharon and Othello are all now present and voted on the last item.
And just for information purposes, did you vote on the summary of actions as well? Okay, good. Thank you.
We're at 6 on the
Okay, thank you. Now, it says here that it's going to be a presentation from Monument Impact. Is that correct? That's correct. Thank you.
So I'll do a quick introduction. At the last meeting, there was a request for the Monument Impact or somebody from the organization involved in the Monument Shuttle to come and give an update to the PCC as to that program and how it started and how it's going. So I gave them a call, and Andrea's here. She introduced herself earlier as we went around the room. She's here to give an update on the shuttle. She'll tell you a little bit about how it started or how it got put together as far as the planning and the route and everything, and what it's been doing real early. I think it's only been running a month or so, and some potential changes that are going to be made based on how the first month or so's run and a meeting that they're going to have. So I'll turn it over to her to give you a presentation.
Perfect. Thank you for having me here. My name is Andrea Foti, and I am the Program Director for Monument Impact. I am representing Monument Impact in this meeting today, and I've come to you to talk a little bit about the Monument Shuttle, which launched in August 15, 2016. So as Peter was saying, it is a brand new program. It is a brand new shuttle. And I have with me a couple of flyers that I would like to pass around once I complete with my presentation that talks to you about all the different places where the shuttle stops and also talks to you about the two different routes that we have. So the shuttle runs from Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, and it has an extended hours on Tuesdays until 8 o'clock. So like Peter was saying, it was a collaborative efforts from a lot of different agencies that benefit from the shuttle to come together under the guidance of a contract consultant to put together a plan to propose to the city and to hire a contractor that has the shuttles. Once the route was decided, there were some key nonprofit organizations that are located on the Monument Corridor area that were chosen to be the stop parts for this shuttle. Just to give you an example of these are the WIC, La Clínica de la Raza, John Muir, Monument Impact, Monument First 5, and so on. We also have Monument Crisis Center. So we came together and said, we know we are very popular in this area, but there's a lot of people that are not able to get to us because they don't have transportation. So we want to be able to solve this issue. After many different meetings that happened before my time at my agency, so unfortunately I won't be able to provide you with that background, they decided to come together and put this plan. And it is a reality right now. It launched a month ago. We are in the process of seeing what is going on. Is it working? Is it not working? Do we need to adjust something? Do we need to change the route? Do we need to add something else? And unfortunately, until this Wednesday, we're going to have a meeting again with all the different agencies where we are going to be providing to them the feedback that we have received from the community members based on their experience. We'd also want to hear from them what has been their experience with their clients, what they have heard. Is it easy to access or not? Is the route is a good route or not? So just to give you an example of a couple of things that we have heard is we have the two shuttles going exactly on the same way. They said to us, why don't we have one going this way and the other one going the other way so they can meet on different points? People have also suggested having some maps of the route inside the bus shuttle, for example. Something else that is new is people who have their phones, they have a smartphone, they're able to download an application so they're able to track where the shuttle is located at any single place. As time has passing by, we have seen more people enjoying the shuttle, especially going on Tuesdays to the farmers market in downtown Todos los Santos Plaza. We have also seen seniors taking the shuttle, and we're very interested at this point to find out what are the stops that are more popular. We're also interested in finding out how many seniors have used the shuttle, how many families have used the shuttle, and how many people with disabilities have used the shuttle. We will have that information until the end of this week because we're going to be meeting with our contractor who is the one running the data at this point. some of the things that are going to happen this week are going to be discussions about possible changes, possible adjustments, and based on the feedback that we hear from the community, we're open to make these adjustments. Our goal and our purpose is for the shuttle to really serve the community. So unfortunately, at this point, that's the only information I will have to provide you. But if you have any questions, please let me know.
So I was actually privileged enough to be a part of the original work group when it convened. Did Regional Center of the East Bay's location get added to the final route? I heard that Farmers Market's on there, and that was good. We really did advocate for that. But
I believe it is. I believe it is because it is just there where the farmers market takes place. So on a different note, Monument Impact will have a community celebration on Saturday, September the 24th, for the opening of the Detroit Avenue. I don't know if you have had the chance to drive around that street lately, but it was a collaboration among different agencies for that street to be complete and to be safe for pedestrians as well as people driving the cars or riding a bike. The celebration will take place on Sunshine, which is not necessarily on the Detroit. It's going to go from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The agencies that are part of the HEAL, which is the Healthy Eating, Active Living Grant from Kaiser Permanente that got together to make this happen, are going to be present. We're going to have activities for the whole family. And of course, we're going to be promoting the shuttle as one of the programs that we have to offer. So we would love to see you there. It's going to be from 10 to 2. It's going to be fun. There's going to be some representatives from the city of Concord talking a little bit about the Detroit. There are going to be some people from the different agencies talking about their experience, and as well some residents about the difference that they have seen with it once the street got completed.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Maybe I can add a little bit, and this is certainly a lot of history way before Andrea was part of the program, but so the Monument Shuttle was an idea that came up many years ago and was originally funded with, I think, the first Lifeline program cycle, and under that particular grant application, the County Connection ran the service, and it was a I think a route-based but deviated a little bit service. It was a subsidized low fare. I think it was 50 cents. And it just didn't get a lot of ridership. And so I think County Connection ran it for 2 or 3 years. And then when they were cutting services, when the economy kind of failed, that was one of the services they eliminated because it just wasn't productive. Monument Impact felt that the service could have been a lot better. They had, certain things they wanted to try. They wanted it to be more of a community-run thing rather than have County Connection run it, just because of the institutional type service. County Connection didn't have a lot of flexibility because of the regulations they operate under to do certain things that, being run as a community service, that they would be able to do. So the city of Concord reapplied, I think, in cycle 3 of the Lifeline program, which is an MTC program. And the committee that reviewed the grant said, yeah, let's try this again with these different kind of operating parameters and having Monument Impact provide the service. And it was going to be provided to really, provide services to help people get to work development locations and jobs and school and other community medical things like that. So they received the funding, and then the funding went through a series of issues with MTC. It was federal funds through the Federal Transit Administration. During the time before Monument Impact was able to get the service started, the federal legislation changed, and the program funding under the new legislation changed. So some of that federal funding went away, and then there was another situation with, this gets really complicated, so I won't, just the PERS situation in California, and the Department of Labor was fighting it, and so some grants got stopped, and that was, the grant that this program was funded under fell into that. So there was some, and I will commend County Connection, because they stepped up and did some money swapping with Measure J funds that we had or that they were receiving, and traded it for some of the other money that MTC had, both federal and STA funds, so that they could remain whole, plus provide some Measure J funding. So technically the funds that support this are Measure J, but they are basically done through a swap with MTC and County Connection. And so it kind of serves still as this, it still needs to fit the requirements of what the Lifeline program are. And so that's what we're looking at when we'll be working with them to make sure that, the appropriate tracking of rides and information that's required under the Lifeline program gets done. So that kind of brings you up to speed as to, and so when all that was finally done and we were able to get that fund swap done, they were able to really start doing their planning towards setting up these routes. So they did a really good job. It probably only took 4 months of meetings and planning and stuff to set all this up and get the service out on the street.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Again, any additional questions or comments? Thank you. We appreciate. Item number 7 says presentation regarding the evacuation and shelter of disabled people displaced during the Clayton fire in Lake County. Peter, is that also something that you're going to manage for us?
I will just introduce your fellow PCC member, Josh Sullivan, who was actually the one who, in a brief conversation he and I had, he had said he had done this, and it was eye-opening. Entertaining is not the right word, but a good experience for you. And so I asked Josh. I thought it was something that you all might be interested to hear, and he particularly was impressed with how Lake Transit was coordinating the service in order to get that taken care of. So I thought it might be interesting for you all to hear.
Well, hi. Let's see if this works. All right. So today, Peter asked me to come and talk, and again, a little bit, we'll go over what FAST is and everything else, but I thought particularly wearing the hat of a person that represents the developmental disability community, as well as someone who sits on this, the PCC, I would try to convey kind of the experience. So it's FAST, Fires, and Paratransit, oh my. And so basically, as a county employee, we actually are what are called disaster service workers. So we can actually be compelled to serve in large crises and other emergency situations, including when the call for what's known as mutual aid comes out. So there was a Sunday, and I hadn't really been keeping up that much with the news, and I got a call saying that there was potentially the need for some mutual aid for the Clayton fire. And I was like, oh, Clayton fire, that's pretty close, No, not that Clayton. So we're actually talking about the Clayton in Lower Lake County. The Clayton, I guess it was the Clayton Valley, right, is what it's called. So it was a pretty devastating fire. Quite a few people were displaced. This was part of the news feed when I was driving up with a colleague. So we were deployed to the Clayton fire. And I think, Peter and I talked briefly on it. The thing that really got me from the perspective of working as a disaster service worker is we already know that the folks that need help the most are the easiest to fall through the cracks. And that proved to be absolutely true. And wearing the FAST hat, that's all we do, is we go in and we work with people that need assistance. So a lot of stories that really stick to the ribs that we took back with us from there. So it's not our Clayton, but what happens when it is? We need to have a common sense approach as a community, and that's all of our providers here, and I'm hoping there is an ask here today. But basically, we have to have a common sense approach, because in a long enough timeline, the most improbable thing becomes almost a certainty. So we could have a very large fire with the droughts and everything else. We could have, earthquake damage, knock on anything resembling wood. And we have to come together to provide a safety net for our community members with access and functional needs. And it's that term I kind of rail against in the disaster planning world, because if you walk up to 90% of the folks that I represent on my county, you say, "Hey, are you a person with AFN?" I'm going to say, "No, what's AFN? I'm a person with a disability," and that's just how, the language identifying, but that's neither here nor there. So, as a community, again, we need to do our very best to ensure that our community members that need help the most don't fall through the cracks. So how does paratransit fit into all this? And this was kind of I wasn't thinking that this is how it would work, but it was. But before I get into that, a quick detour that may relate to the story. So Sunday night, the call comes out, and I'm joking around with my wife, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do this. I've been compelled. This is what we're going to do. And we hadn't really talked about it that much beforehand, that, that this is something that county employees, we are able to do. And but I was like, oh, no, don't worry about it. I'm going to be miles and miles and miles and miles away from the fire. This is where people go to be safe, right? And so through FAST, which is called the Functional Assessment Service Team, and I have a colleague that'll come and speak a little bit on that and maybe try to do some recruitment in a minute. We go into shelters and we help folks that need help. I mean, that's really the core of it. And that's part of that is ensuring accessibility. So when I first got there, this was the accessible restroom. They were using it to store all of their chairs. And we did have several shelter residents that used wheelchairs. So, it's that lens of, okay, just because you have an accessible facility doesn't quite mean that it's accessible. This is kind of what I told my wife. We're going to move chairs. We're going to attend a lot of meetings with Red Cross. And ultimately, we're going to take barriers like this and break out the sledgehammer and knock out and make them accessible. So lo and behold, a day or two into the deployment, this crazy paratransit bus driver comes running up to me and he's like, "Hey, you're with the folks that help people with disabilities." I'm like, "Yeah." He's all, "We got to go, look." And you look over and there's this whole pillar of smoke coming from just over the horizon. And what ended up happening was one of the backup shelters being run at a private church. A gentleman decided on the hill behind the church that he was going to mow his lawn on a 103-degree heat day with a raging wildfire just right down the road. Caught fire almost instantly, just tinder. So camera fades out, camera fades back in. I'm on a paratransit bus just flying with this guy, and he's like, oh, what is it, Dr. Strangelove? Like, yeehaw, we're going. I'm like, oh boy. And I get a text from my wife saying, "Hey, how's everything going?" I'm just like, phone in the pocket. I'm done. But it was pretty amazing. And it was an experience that, again, everyone in this room has the opportunity. You all, in the disaster planning world, we call it SMEs, or subject matter experts. Everyone in this room is a subject matter expert. And in a large enough emergency, you could be called to task. So one of the things that was interesting is, thankfully, when we got there, it was just like the cavalry came in. There were like 5 of these just giant helicopters that came down right in front of us, and then I don't know what the airplanes are called, but these huge cargo planes that were just dumping this pink stuff everywhere. It was pretty nuts. So what did paratransit do? Well, besides the crazy paratransit driver, when the fires first erupted, and they erupted in a place called Lower Lake, the community that was impacted the most had the most need for paratransit, for any sort of transportation, because they were folks with ambulatory issues. They were folks that used wheelchairs. So paratransit actually came in and evacuated the entire Lower Lake community. How did they do it? A lot of buses and a whole bunch of crazy drivers, which was awesome. One thing, wearing the disaster planning hat. I know Tri-Delta's, I keep looking at Tom because I know you guys developed your DOC, right? Or you guys, an EOC, okay. My alphabet soup starts to get crossed. So it's really, really important that if you have the service, because business isn't going to be happening as normal in a large enough emergency, but to be reimbursed from the federal government, you have to have a pre-existing MOU. And I think my colleague can talk a little bit about that with the county of origin. And next steps, we'll have her come and do that. But as I end, I just wanted to end with a story. So this was Scotty, and I can actually use her name and her face because she did an interview for the Chronicle. And she was one of the sweet, again, stories that stick to your ribs. She's one of the sweetest elders that I've ever had the opportunity to meet and serve. And the thing that she said in there, it's really small, but she says, I lost my home and that's all I've got. And what they didn't quote her is right after that, she said, but if the buses hadn't have come got me, I would have lost a lot more. And that's my Scotty story. So come on up.
Hello, everybody. I'm actually here representing Marceline Delicado from the Office of Emergency Services. I'm sure she's been here before. I'm actually the newest member of the FAST steering committee. I'm still learning about FAST myself. I'm also from the Office of Emergency Services. I'm an emergency planning coordinator for the community warning system, so that's a little bit different than FAST, but that's just my background. So Marcel wanted me to give you some handouts about the FAST program. We don't have a local brochure, but she added our state brochure for the FAST program. If you could pass this one. Yep. So Josh talked to you a little bit about what FAST is. Does everybody understand what FAST does? Yes? So like he said, we do deploy in case of emergencies and crises and disasters and help people with disabilities in the shelter places. However, Contra Costa County is expanding the settings for FAST, not just in shelters and beyond just care. We're expanding the FAST to pods, points of distributions, flu clinics, and any other points of gathering. So we're going a little bit beyond just shelter. We do have a steering committee, and we meet quarterly. We currently have 21 members, and we have 75 trained members that can be deployed. Josh talked about the recent Lake County deployment. Thank you for that. We're always recruiting any friends, family that you know, including yourselves, that want to learn more about the program or get involved with the program. You're more than welcome to reach out to our steering committee. I included in the back a page with all the contacts for the steering committee if you need to reach out to us. And what you see on the first page here is our agenda for our workshop coming up on October 13th. If you're interested in learning more about the program, reach out to us for that workshop. It's going to be hosted at our EOC, County EOC in Martinez. And there's a lot of interesting topics that you can learn about that day. All of our members participate in drills with any emergency drills. Last one we had, it was hosted at the county EOC on September 8th, our Yellow Command exercise. And that was an earthquake exercise. And locally, we participate in CDSS and state activities. We do participate in national conference calls to learn about best practices and lesson learned. Currently, we are trying to coordinate a local training for surrounding county, including surrounding counties, and that would be hosted at the county EOC. We haven't really secured a date yet, but if you're interested, we will definitely update you about that. Okay. And Josh mentioned MOU about transport in case of emergencies. That is part of our emergency pre-planning. So before any disaster happens, definitely that would have to happen, the MOU, the memorandum of understanding between the county and any transportation provider would have to be in place before any disaster happens. So I can give you details on what we currently have, because I didn't bring that with me today. But we can definitely provide that to you, or any steps on that. Okay.
So I know that in trying to recruit folks and different entities for MOUs, the question always comes up, so I'll ask it. So if I sign an MOU for my agency, does that mean that I have to help out in an emergency?
You will be asked, definitely.
So it's not mandatory, right? So if your agency ends up not having operational capacity,
Exactly.
You're not going to be forced into anything you can't handle.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments that we would like to ask of our guests today? Peter?
So I guess for either of you, what are the activities that members of FAST, if they're deployed to a shelter, I mean, what's the list of, besides knocking out the center of, a double door or moving chairs in the restroom, what all is kind of your charge? Do you become, I'm assuming that there's a structure in place with regard to whoever the head of the shelter is, and you're deployed there, and how you manage it. I'm just kind of interested in the functionality of how that works and kind of what your responsibilities are once you get on site.
I'll let you answer that question.
So part of it is rapport building. Currently, the American Red Cross uses embedded FAST members to help people self-identify. Because in an emergency, people tend not to reach out anyway. You're going through your own level of shock and your own coping. So part of it is you walk the floor of the shelter, you get to know folks. You use your own subject matter expertise to kind of pre-assess. And then you help people get the help they need. I mean, that's really the core of it. And you do report to the shelter manager. You attend the briefings. It's very structured in that regard. There were folks that had life-sustaining meds that they weren't able to bring with them. And we were coordinating with Paratransit to get them to the nearest open pharmacy to be able to get those medications. There was a person that had an appointment that they couldn't miss for a treatment, and again, it was working with Paratransit. So that question of what does Paratransit do, or what are they capable of doing, a whole lot, and it was essential life-saving services.
Acknowledged? Yes. Debbie.
So if there were paratransit vehicles that were available to be used and there were not paratransit staff able to use them, is there a possibility that the vehicles could be used by somebody who is not Class B licensed because this is a Class C scenario, or do you have workarounds for such things? So maybe not even paratransit, maybe not even, because I know he's going risk, 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 and he should be going risk, risk, risk. But so if there were, say, a nonprofit organization like mine that had vehicles, but our driver was in Hawaii, and we wanted to say, here are our vehicles, is there some insurance that is in place? Is there a waiver that allows Peter to drive that vehicle to get 3 people someplace as opposed to 9 people or 10 plus driver, whatever the regulation is?
I can answer you for sure. We would definitely have to have drivers that are capable and trained to drive the type of vehicle that we need. Being that your driver, or maybe we have our own drivers from the Public Works Department, it would have to be a driver that's actually capable of driving that vehicle. So not any kind of driver. But we may be able to get the drivers from a different place than where we get the vehicles.
So I'll clarify that the type of license required is related to how many passengers they're carrying as opposed to their ability to drive the vehicle in some cases. Okay.
So what I would throw in is, again, we draw the short straw as civil servants when it comes to emergencies. Our Public Works Department has a bunch of folks that have Class B, Class A licenses, but they use it to drive different types of equipment. So in situations where maybe your program would say, hey, I might not have the people because, I know my staff live in Bethel Island or whatever it is, and the freeway's not accessible, but I can give you the stuff. Oftentimes we can then, just knowing that resource is there would be a step in the right direction, for sure.
And all of these details would be specified in an MOU beforehand, so you would know what happens.
Any further questions?
Yes, if I might.
Tom?
A question, and which I'll ask at the end, but a comment on what we just said. I am not a legal expert by any stretch. However, there are a couple of things I know from my participation in our program, our various programs. One is there are Good Samaritan laws that are somewhat protective. Two is I'm thinking that when it comes to licensing, especially for a paratransit vehicle, you're not going to be in revenue service at that point. So there's probably an exception that can be made as long as someone can safely operate the vehicle. And given that many of them are just large vans, those are not something that's not all that complex. I mean, if you drive one in daily service. Additionally, and I know this from fixed route buses and some of the issues that come up with union MOUs and about the ability to send drivers into what may be dangerous situations. I have a friend, an acquaintance, works at the federal level, who once pointed out to me, he teaches out at San Francisco State, and they were analyzing this very subject. And he said, oh, you don't have to worry about your drivers, because we'll send the National Guard and take your buses if that's what it takes. And it's kind of an interesting internal discussion, because there are some at work who said, they're not taking our buses. And I said, you know what, you go stand out in front and tell the guys with the M16s they can't have the buses, okay? So I think I don't think there's that many issues around it. I mean, I certainly wouldn't see us getting too uptight about it in providing assistance. My question is this, Josh, since you were involved in an actual incident. It's more minor, but it relates to people's ability to cope and the things that happen in these situations. What did you do about pets?
That's a wonderful question. So for folks that followed the first Lake County fire last year, pets and the Red Cross's ability to accommodate pets other than qualified service animals and the typical caveat there, actually limited people from using the shelters. So in the original Lake County fire, and I do have pictures somewhere on my computer at work, you see the empty shelter and then thousands of people out in the fairground parking lot because they didn't want to leave their dogs, cats, horses, things like that. So lessons learned this time, we were able to set up a pet accessible, like almost micro shelter behind the main facility, and no one was turned away. But basically because you had folks with medical conditions and allergies inside, the pets had to stay outside. But we did set up mini shelters. It was misted with water. It was pretty amazing.
I have a question for Josh, and I'm acquainted with mutual aid because for the Loma Prieta earthquake, I was a teacher in San Lorenzo, and we were immediately brought in. We had to come to the school, even though the students obviously weren't there, to stand guard and to make sure the property was safe and all that kind of stuff. What agency do you work for that would give you mutual aid in Lake County? Maybe I don't know where you live, but I'm just curious.
So I hang my hat at Contra Costa County, so I work for the county. So does Olivia. And when we actually sign on at the very bottom of our first orientation material, it says raise your right hand, we're swearing you in. So Tom has talked about the EOC that he has now with Tri-Delta, and it's pretty awesome. The county has an EOC, and that's where I believe you hang your hat, right? So another county identifies a need, and then they say, hey, surrounding counties, can anyone come help? And then they start pulling stuff.
Yes, our Office of Emergency Services in the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department has its own mutual aid department, works out of the EOC, and that's where we get the requests through. Emergency Operations Center. I apologize.
Hi, I'm Michael Hopfe with Independent Living Resources. And I think it was already covered, but as far as I have 30 years of law enforcement, and I was a member of OES in Alameda County. A lot of these things are simple to overcome. As far as drivers are concerned, if you're going to have for say paratransit, and there are laws, Good Samaritan laws, good faith laws, and yes, there's also things called posse comitatus. If you want to take the van because it's an emergency, then you're going to take the van because it's emergency. But you can also have a running list that goes across every county, and other counties will call drivers to respond to that. And we also, for Loma Prieta, all the counties were called out for that. That's your obligation when you're in the mutual aid type of thing. And you could have a list for that. Then there's also each county involved, since you're going to have training for all the counties, then your radio systems and all that coordinate with each other so that they're compatible, so that you don't have to worry. Once you get a call, you can respond using your radios and things of that nature. But it's easy to have a log of services for like animals. You can get every police department in all the counties has an OEC, Office of Emergency, and so you're going to have, each one will have one, and then they can respond from there and then make calls and have all the resources that you need respond. That's just it. And then I am interested in becoming part of it. Although my question was because my group of people are all disabled, and we have a lot of knowledge and resources, but physically we're not capable of doing too much. But so.
I would love to.
I want to answer that.
Okay, I would just say being part of the FAST steering committee, there's a line in our community called Nothing About Us Without Us. And one of the things that I'm actively trying to do is pull in community members with disabilities, because the perspective you can give is going to be worlds different than anyone else on the team.
Assessing capacity that you have is far beyond, sorry, I'm over speaking, but and the ability to go in and say whatever it is that needs to be said without worrying about stumbling on yourself. You're going to go in, you're going to say, you're going to look, and you're going to be able to provide feedback that other people can't. I mean, that's invaluable, in my opinion.
So am I taking it I'll see you on October 13th? All right.
Thank you.
And actually, there was no problem with any over speaking because you were talking to the presenter, so that actually worked just nicely. Thank you. Anybody else with questions or comments?
I just have a couple things to add.
Thank you.
About the MOU, again, MOU are mostly in place to deal with refunds from the federal system. So that's where MOUs really come in handy. Also, I want to say our FAST steering committee have 21 members, but they all have different backgrounds in the access and functional needs community. Myself, I joined the FAST steering committee not because of my role with the sheriff's office, but because of my background, my personal background. I'm currently a national trainer for drivers that transport our community members for non-emergency medical needs. So that's where I come in place. Any questions? Okay.
One quick one on the MOUs. So some of the operators in the room are actually cities that have paratransit operations. I'm assuming if the city has an MOU with the county, then they'd be part of that. They don't have to have a separate MOU as a paratransit operator, as long as they're part of the city budget funded by the city.
Exactly. Yes, it would have to be in that MOU. If it's not, it could be added, but it wouldn't have to be necessarily a separate one.
Thank you very, very much.
I probably think that most of the cities, I know El Cerrito pretty much has MOUs with everyone. Because I get to do it. They do it with the federal and the state. An example is our firefighters are sent out now to fight fires and things along that line. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item, number 8, Service Review Advisory Committee. Is there an individual with that report, or? Kim, thank you.
Thank you. So the last SRAC meeting was September 6th. I'm sorry.
This week, yes.
Yep, September 6th. The committee received a report or a presentation from Drennan Shelton on the Human Services Transportation Plan for MTC, and they were asked to provide feedback on that. They also received a report from John Canaperi, which is Canaperi and Associates, who does our annual East Bay Paratransit Customer Satisfaction Survey. There were no real significant changes. The overall satisfaction is still over 90%, and the satisfied and very satisfied customers were in the low 90s. One of the major changes was there are certain volunteer demographic questions that are asked, and we found that 80% of our riders now have cell phones, which was 50%? Or like 40 to 50% the year before. So we found that really interesting, especially with the rollout of the IVR system, or interactive voice response system. Does that sound familiar? It's the system that would allow imminent arrival calls. So if individuals have a cell phone, then the system would call them while they're out at the doctor's office, for instance, letting them know that their ride is coming. They also received a broker's report that compared fiscal year 2014-15 to this past fiscal year. No real significant changes in that as well. The on-time performance for fiscal year 15 was 90.9%. 15-16 was 90.1%. However, complaints dropped and commendations grew. And another data point, if you all are interested, is there are total passengers for 14-15 $727,600, and then for 15-16, 731,300 passengers. I think that was it. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that sums it.
All right, there we go.
Any further questions? We have Peter there, and then
Was there, on the customer satisfaction survey, was there any questions specific to the IVR system, since that's a new system? Just asking. Okay. The timing might have been off, because yeah.
Right. One other thing, the total report should be available next month. Yeah, so if you all want copies of that, then I can provide those.
Kim, the measure about cell phones, did it include whether those were data capable or not, smartphones? Is that one of the, did it iterate that out? Okay. Well, I thought I'd share, we often hear that not everybody has cell phones. It usually is put up as a block against some of the things that we propose. And yet our observation is cell phone penetration and even data phone is way beyond the kinds of reports we get back. You can just observe it, meaning it's a lot of passengers have that capability. They're much more so than don't. So,
thank you. Anyone? Okay, let's move on to agenda item 9, Senior Mobility Action Council. Who is going to make that report? Or thank you.
I don't think there's anybody else here who attends that. So I will say I was only there for not quite the full meeting. I was there at the onset, and we, Rita and I provided an update to the Senior Mobility Action Council on Measure X, and we talked about the importance of Measure X as it pertains to accessible transportation. We talked about shifting the language from paratransit to accessible transportation and understanding that accessible transportation includes paratransit as one of a myriad, hopefully, of options for riders. We talked about the importance of the timing given that it's a presidential election year, that the number of voters that it takes to pass a tax measure is a pretty, 2/3 is a steep number, and I think we were polling pretty damn close to what a standard deviation might absorb. So it's a really, the push needs to come out, and we talked about it as this body is a subcommittee structurally, and then some, to the Advisory Council on Aging. How could we get this information? The group certainly was in support. Or Vicki, you might have been at the meeting, no? Yeah. She was quiet. Just dawns on me, I'm looking across the room. Hey, wait a minute. So talked about how we might get since we had the support of this group and understanding that we needed to move it forward, how we might expedite that process given the timing of the election and the need for multiple avenues of education related to the measure. So it was decided that I would craft something and get it to one of the members who would then get it to the executive committee of the Advisory Council on Aging, and that they would go through their process of approving it and then putting a letter together, and that letter should either be completed into Don Tatson? I'm sorry, I was going through all the names in my brain. He's the one who was in charge of the special CCTA board meetings related to Measure X, or no? I don't know. Anyway, no.
I guess I don't understand what the letter is that you are going to send is.
I was not going
Okay,
to send, to be
the
clear,
county-
the Advisory Council
Council
on
on Aging.
Aging
Yeah.
was sending to Tatson that the Advisory Council on Aging supports Measure X, an official letter of support from the Advisory Council on Aging. It's very process laden because it's.
Yeah, they probably just to the board of the authority. Let me find out.
We
and
went through that whole process
let me
already.
find out, and I'll let you know.
Okay, but I think it may, that ship may have sailed
So-
because we had multiple conversations with multiple different people about
Yeah.
to whom it should be addressed.
So I don't have my official script in front of me, but the authority now
Work on
has separated from, because it is now an official ballot major and the authority being a government agency, we can only provide educational material with regard to the transportation expenditure plan and what the funding's going to go for. We aren't associated with either a for or an against campaign in any way, or nor can we be. It would be an inappropriate use of public funds. So I have to find out what that means. If from a letter of support for the measure, I'd have to find out what CCTA's role would be in accepting that letter. Our board can do stuff independently.
It was
as to the
addressed to
authority-
Don Tatson as the.
Okay.
The,
That's probably fine.
okay. We did go through quite a process to find out to whom the letter should be addressed. At any rate, the group engaged, I think, very lively discussion on how they could go about educating, because certainly that's the role of everybody at that moment in time. Without the Advisory Council on Aging's executive committee support of the measure at that point in time, we talked about how, as individuals and representatives within our agencies, we can go about educating through senior centers, through health fairs, through various other ways. So there was some robust discussion about that. And after that, we had a BART presentation on their sales, not within Measure X, but their own sales, their assessment tax. And Gail Murray and Kim Basting came and did the presentation. And I left in the middle of that presentation, so I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
I don't remember very much what like in detail, like how Debbie remembers. But it was my understanding that the tax actually will take place in property tax. And so I really am not the person to discuss what they presented, but they are available for presentations. They are. That's what they said. You know, they're going around and, you know, educating folks on what it is. So the contact information, I'm sure we could get for everybody. And that's basically all that we discussed at the meeting. Not a whole lot going on other than the voting.
So I remember now. So it's a bond. So in the case of BART, they want to sell bonds, and those bonds would be secured by tax assessments. But basically, it's a bond. You know, they getting approval to sell bonds.
Now, one thing I do remember that it's not for new cars or anything. It's just to be used to upgrade their system that they currently have. So.
Anyone else with comments, questions? Thank you very much for your recollections. Thank you. All right. I do notice that another person walked in who's a member of the public. Would you like to introduce yourself? This may be a little out of order, but I noticed she came in after.
Thank you very much. My name is Donnie Mitchum. I'm with ILR, Independent Living Resources. I'm the ex-board president of 6 years, board member, and a member of ILR. I'm here because I've been working with Steve Point, Dial-A-Ride, since July of last year. I took the matter to my board, and we're trying to help them raise $300,000 specifically for Dial-A-Ride, because the program is so severely underfunded. Unfortunately, like all of the Far East Contra Costa travels, we are the most underfunded of all, and it's the seniors and the disabled who are suffering from this. I know because I became a rider of Dial-A-Ride June of last year. I had a knee replacement. I have 7 protruding vertebrae in my spine, and I have a couple of other disabilities. I've been disabled since 1991. What I found out last year when I started riding is that the riders are traveling under horrendous conditions, and some of their lives are put in danger. My life, my very life, was put in danger last year. I ended up almost having to go to the emergency room. My doctor had to work on me, And these are issues I brought to Steve that need to be addressed. Mike here is one of our project managers. He used to ride County Connection, Paratransit, and Dollar Ride. And he, like many other riders, will no longer ride it because it is horrible. And so I think your next meeting, I would like to be placed on the agenda so it can be discussed. But today I wanted to come in and introduce myself.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
And that brings up item 10, which are future agenda items. And where is she?
Mike.
I believe that's our board member's wife.
But
So we did public introductions at the beginning of the meeting, so we knew
Right.
everybody who was in the audience.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. Following up on the lady's statement about underfunding of Dollar Ride, my question basically for the Paratransit Coordinating Council is, how is Paratransit funded? I read in the TEP just a little blurb about maybe 12% of something, but that's 12% of what? And when does this council discuss budget items and the allocation of the budget?
So with regard to the individual operator budgets, that is not in the jurisdiction of this council. The funding that we provide through Measure J is discussed and dispersed and approved by this council, and that's done in June. So we get claims from all the operators. So the the amounts that are dedicated to the different operators are designated in the current Measure J expenditure plan. So all the operators on an annual basis claim those funds and they send in an application. And that generally occurs in March through April, May, and then it comes to this, to our May meeting. It comes to our May meeting and then it's approved by the authority board in June. So that's for the Measure J portion of their allocations. We can certainly do at the next meeting, we can do a kind of how paratransit or how Dollar Ride service is funded. And we can get a team of our operators who are in this room because it's funded differently by all of them. They all use different pieces of money, different colors of money to fund their services. They all have different philosophies as regard to capital versus operating versus fixed versus paratransit versus this versus that, and how they put that puzzle together. So it might be an interesting thing. I don't think it's something we've done for quite a while. So if I could, since they're the ones that were here, I can pretty much explain, the city's funding sources, I think, but maybe get some help from Kim and Tom. We can probably put to a presentation together maybe. We might be able to try and get it either November or January. I'm not sure what I don't want to commit them to, spending too much time between now and November. So certainly by the January meeting and maybe the November meeting, we could come and do a presentation on that. Actually, I like that idea. So.
Could that include any maybe future possible funding that could be looked at as well?
Well, it could. I mean, it could. It could. I mean, we've always had an agenda item that was potential funding, but we kind of took it off, I think, just because, nobody ever had any for so long. There was no new money coming in. So that's kind of the current problem, is there's no money out there to help fund these things. So, but we could talk about that as part of the presentation too. That'll probably be a whole meeting, just that one item.
I would just add in that, yeah, that would be amazing as a member of this board. It would be very helpful to maybe see, the flow of money, where it comes from, and then have individuals say, and this is where it goes, both sides of the coin. Okay.
I think everybody should have to serve 12 years and learn it.
Congratulations, Debbie. So I'll put that down as a future agenda item.
Thank you. And if there are no further agenda items for Tom?
News to share, Michael.
We're not at that section yet. If you would allow me to conduct the agenda, I would appreciate it.
I thought you were getting ready to hit the thing and say, so adjourned.
No, I was going to say number 11 is the next meeting date. That's just an announcement. Is November 21st, 2016 at 2:00 p.m.
Let me mention that if any of you know you're not going to be here because it's a holiday week, go ahead and let Irene know as soon as possible, because if we're not kind of a quorum, we'll cancel it as soon as we can, and that way you guys don't have to worry about it.
Thank you. Item number 12, which would then be news to share. Starting, of course, with Camp Deer. No? I thought I saw. Oh, you just scratching. Okay. Jan?
Yes, El Cerrito is having a resource fair October 5th, and I'm happy to announce that Mobility Matters and East Bay Paratransit will both be present. East Bay Paratransit will also be offering seniors the opportunity to get their very own official Clipper card, and that's going to be October 5th. AC Transit. AC Transit will be with us for the Clipper cards October 5th, and that's from 9 to 1 at the Community Center, 7007 Mosier Lane. Thank you.
Let's see, City of San Pablo. Oh, we're surplusing 2 vehicles. Actually, tonight the City Council will be approving that and beginning our process to purchase a new vehicle that apparently will take about 5 months to get. So, but I'm putting it out there because we are definitely going to have to put it out to all Measure J recipients who may be interested in these 2 minivans, 2011, who have been converted for wheelchairs. They're very low mileage, very good vehicles. They just don't serve our purpose any longer. So that's basically it.
Thank you. Isha? Mr. Sharon? And I suppose the 2 of you will be speaking. Is that correct?
I certainly will. This person to my left is Deanna Perry, and she will be taking my place on this committee. Deanna is our new manager of accessible services. She has been with us for 16 years, same as I. She's worked in accessible services before. She's very competent, and I agreed to bring her and introduce her. So I hope you will all welcome her and work with her. If we do what you propose, Peter, if we do a funding presentation, then I, in fact, probably will be back for that because Deanna doesn't do the funding. But
thank you.
Can I get more information on the last comment, please?
I am not going anywhere. However, I am getting to an age where I could retire someday, but that's not my game plan.
Show off. So we had a hospital readmissions summit last week at Center Concord, and we had a little over 200 people that came, and I just wanted to say that non-emergency medical transportation came up and transportation came up, and it comes up in social context, in health context, in workforce development context. It comes up in every context, and I just think that we need to start having larger and broader conversations, and I'm very happy you asked about the funding streams because I think that will instigate some of that conversation.
I would just throw in with the TEP and everything that's happening, our next DD Council meeting is next Wednesday, the 28th, I believe, 10 to noon at Regional Center of the East Bay. We are having the County Office of Elections and Disability Rights California come in for voter education and awareness. And then the day before at the Concord Farmers Market, we're going to try to have a booth for National Voter Registration Day. So the first thing to actually being able to use your voice is make sure that you're registered to vote.
Any other comments, questions?
Just one thing real quick for me. I don't know if anybody else was on the webinar this morning. Aging 2.0 sponsored a webinar. LYFT, L-Y-F-T, the TNC has a team dedicated to working with older adults now, and they've started a new program, LYFT Concierge, and it allows partnerships between LYFT and other agencies, and the agencies are able to basically book rides on LYFT for clients. And if you want more information, I can get it to you. It sounds like, it's not the answer to everybody, obviously, but it certainly would be an answer for a lot. And LYFT is willing to set up partnerships based on, agencies being able to subsidize the cost of the trip and have a fixed flat fee for the client in that case. So there's starting to be more opportunities out there that could help relieve some space and some trips on dollar ride services and paratransit services. So at CCTA, we're into technology and innovation, so we're going to follow this closely. I'm trying to get in contact with this LYFT team and get a little bit more information, but I was on the webinar this morning, and there was 3 different groups that have these partnerships. One of them is in San Mateo County, so we do have a local Bay Area group that's working with LYFT on this, so we'll keep you all informed.
I know that this is a difficult decision for the group, but I would like to ask if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion.
And is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, leave.